Hi folks, HR Funk here. With a video that has been a long time coming, I'm going to be discussing this new Hi-Lux close to medium range 1 to 8 power rifle scope. And I got this rifle scope from Hi-Lux probably 3 months ago, and I intended to have this review out a lot sooner, but one thing or another kept delaying me, and finally I'm going to be able to bring you this report. Now the good news is, during that period of time, I've had a lot of experience with this scope, and I can tell you about how it's gone. We're going to be taking a close-up look at the 1 to 8 power CMR here in the shop. I'll also be talking about how it performed out on the range. I'll be showing you a little bit of range footage, but not a lot. And also I can show you some results of how it performed at the range. So with that little bit of an introduction, here we go. We will start this up-close look at the new Hi-Lux CMR 1 to 8 scope. The way you receive it, which is in a UPS box, and I have not removed this scope from the packaging yet. So this is going to be my first look at it as well. And I need to get it out of all the packaging. This is the box as you receive it from Hi-Lux, indicating that it is the 1 to 8 power CMR scope. And we get a user's manual, a lens cloth, the optic itself, a battery, so batteries are included for that illuminated reticle, and a hex wrench for making adjustments. And I don't see anything else in the box. Let me get the scope out of its packaging and we'll go on from here. And also I'm going to be mounting it in this UTG quick release mount, and this is courtesy of Optics Planet. This is the second one of these mounts that I have received, and it's going to take a little bit of work to get it out of its packaging. Hold on just a second. So here is that UTG quick release mount, and this is the UTG AccuSync QR cantilever mount. And this is the second one of these that I have used, and I really like these mounts. They are modestly priced, but they work very well. If you have an optic that you're planning on removing periodically or maybe swapping from one firearm to another, this makes a very quick, easy, and economical means to do so. So the next time you see the 1 to 8 power CMR scope, it's going to be mounted in this UTG mount, and we'll go on with the review from there. So here is the Hi-Lux 1 to 8 power close to medium range rifle scope. In terms of its general characteristics, it has a 30mm main tube that is machined from a single piece of aircraft grade aluminum. It is 10.4 inches long, it weighs 18.7 ounces, and it's finished with a Type 3 hard coat anodizing. As the name implies, this is a 1 to 8 power optic. Magnification is changed with the adjustment ring that you see right here. And this is also checkered around its circumference, which makes it very easy to move. And the ring turns very smoothly. And in case you need any extra help whatsoever, there's also a throw lever to make quick magnification changes, and that is very easy to operate that adjustment ring. The 1 to 8 power CMR has a 24mm objective lens that you can see here. All of the lenses are fully multi-coated for maximum light transmission and clarity, and also all the air to glass lens surfaces have the Hi-Lux Diamond Tough 14 coating for scratch and abrasion resistance. Here we see the ocular or rear lens of the scope, which features a fast focus eyepiece that can be used to bring the reticle into sharp clarity, which is important because this optic has a true 1 power or 0 magnification setting, and in order to use the scope to its maximum efficiency, the reticle needs to be in sharp focus. Now, as I recall, Hi-Lux put out a short video some time ago explaining the proper procedure for focusing this eyepiece. For more information on that, check out the Hi-Lux YouTube channel. With the reticle properly focused and the magnification set to 1 power as you see here, this scope can essentially be used just like a red dot optic. So you can fire with both eyes open, maintaining your situational awareness and getting that very quick target acquisition that we typically associate with a red dot more so than a magnified optic. The 1-to-8 power CMR features low profile adjustment turrets that you see here. These are capped to prevent inadvertent adjustment or movement. And something I like about these are the checkered surfaces around the circumference of the caps. That makes it very easy to get a hold of and get those things off. The turrets themselves are graduated in half-minute of angle increments, and there are 50 minutes of angle in one complete revolution of the turret, meaning 100 clicks. The clicks themselves, I've found, mostly are pretty good. Occasionally you'll get one that's a little bit indistinct, but not bad, and certainly nothing that can't be used to adjust your windage or elevation setting. The caps are also resettable to 0, so once you have your proper 0 setting, all you have to do is remove this screw, lift off the cap, turn it so 0 lines back up with the witness mark for either elevation or windage, push the cap back down, tighten the screw, and return your turret cover, and your turret is reset to 0, and the cap is back on once again to prevent it from being inadvertently moved. The scope has 120 minutes of angle of total elevation and windage adjustment from mechanical center of the tube, and if you don't know how to reset your optic to mechanical center, there are instructions for doing so in the manual that comes with this scope. The CMR 1-to-8 has an illuminated center dot, once again, so you can use this just like a red dot, or you can use that for a fine aiming point if you're using magnification with your scope. Either way, the left side turret controls the illumination. Settings 1 and 2 are for night vision equipment, and the other settings are for normal daylight conditions. Now, I've noticed that this is very, very bright, and Hi-Lux rates this as being daylight bright. It definitely is. I've had this scope out in some very bright, sunny conditions, and I've never had any difficulty seeing that dot whatsoever. In fact, I can usually see it on the very low setting, so I don't even have to turn it up very high to be able to see that dot. The left side turret also does double duty as the battery compartment, and this runs on a standard CR 2032 battery. Here I'm trying to get you all a look through the scope, and this is going about as well as it usually does. I'll give my typical disclaimer and say that the view of the reticle and the image through the scope is much better than you are seeing now. But I wanted you to get a look at what Hi-Lux calls their B-dot, BDC, or bullet drop compensating reticle. When I turn on the illumination, this is the lowest setting. This is 1 here, and I'm going to turn it up brighter and brighter, and you can see that center dot gets very bright. This is the halfway point here. This is number 5. I don't think I've ever turned it up this bright when I've actually been outside. So this is a very bright dot. There's the maximum setting. Also visible on the reticle, specifically the lower half of the vertical stadia line, you can see that there are various bullet drop compensating indicator marks, and there are a couple of points that I need to make about these. First off, this is calibrated to be true for the 556 NATO cartridge, but they are only true when the scope is set to its maximum magnification of 8 power. Anything else, it's not going to correspond to that trajectory. Also, these marks should work properly for anything else that has a similar trajectory to the 556 NATO cartridge. But, and this is a pretty big but, I don't know specifically what ballistic data Hi-Lux used in order to calibrate these aiming points. So I don't know if this is 20-inch ballistics, I don't know if it's 16-inch ballistics, I don't know if it's M193 or it's M882. I'm not sure specifically what they used, so if you're going to use these, make sure you go out and test it in your own rifle with your own ammunition so you know where precisely you're going to hit. However, the way the scope is designed to work is you zero it at 50 yards. Once you have it zeroed at 50 yards, then it should also be true for 200 yards. So the first holdover that you see, the first stadia line or indicator mark that you come to below the center crosshairs, is the 300-yard holdover point. The next one down is the 400-yard holdover, next one down is the 500-yard holdover, and the one at the bottom is the 600-yard holdover. Also, these indicators are intended to subtend 18 inches at the various distances that I just laid out. So the top line, the one directly below the center of crosshairs, should subtend 18 inches at a distance of 300 yards. The next one down should subtend that distance of 18 inches at 400 yards, so forth and so on. So if you're aiming at something that you know to be 18 inches wide, like a standard competitive target, then you should be able to use those indicators to get a quick distance reference, and then you can use the proper holdover for the target at that distance. Now, obviously, that's only going to work if you have a target that's 18 inches wide, or if you have something that's easily divided by that. For example, if you have something that's 9 inches wide, then you know it would be half that length, so forth and so on. Lastly, you can see on the horizontal stadia, there are various indicators that can be used for wind drift or moving target leads or what have you. And also, according to Hi-Lux, you can use those lower aiming points for moving target leads, wind drift, etc. So you do have all that information that can be gleaned from the reticle if you are using it properly. And lastly, the CMR 1-8 comes with a set of plastic flip-up scope covers. This optic is covered by the Hi-Lux Diamond Tough lifetime warranty, and that is good for the lifetime of the scope. So if you have any problems, you can contact Hi-Lux and they will repair or replace it for you as needed. Okay, I think I got all the technical jargon out of the way. Now let's talk about how the Hi-Lux CMR 1-8 scope performed when I had it out on the range. I mounted this scope to no less than 3 different rifles. Those were my Smith & Wesson M&P 1522 chambered for the 22 rimfire cartridge. I also mounted it to one of my AR-15s chambered for the 5.56 NATO cartridge, and I mounted it to my Ruger American Hunter rifle chambered for the 7.62 NATO cartridge. Now you might be wondering why I used the Ruger American Hunter. Reason is because in the manual for the 1-8 CMR, it mentions that those holdover compensations will work for the 7.62 NATO cartridge the same as they will for the 5.56 NATO cartridge, and I wanted to test that out. But before I get to the performance with the centerfire cartridges, I want to talk a little bit about how it did with the rimfire in that 1522 rifle. And if you saw my review that I had a while back on the 1522 where I talked about some of the enhancements I'd done to it, that was one of the ones that I talked about. And I found it to be very convenient because on that vertical stadia, what would normally be the 400-yard holdover was almost perfect for my 100-yard holdover with my 22 ammunition that I typically use in that rifle. So I found that to be very convenient, and that's an example of how, with a little bit of experimentation, you can adapt some of these optics to other firearms than the ones they were specifically meant to be used on, and that just worked out well for me with that 1522. I was originally intending on taking these rifles to a longer range and actually testing these various holdovers at those distances. But because of the time that it took to get this part of the review finally finished, I decided to do things a little bit differently and test the subtension at 100 yards with the 50-yard zero, and I used this target to accomplish that. What I did first, I started out with the AR-15, the 5.56 NATO cartridge. I zeroed that rifle at a distance of 50 yards. Then I moved this target out to a distance of 100 yards. At 100 yards, with the sight height above the bore of that AR-15 rifle, I knew that these bullets should be striking about 1.5 inches high, and I fired 2 shots directly at the center of this shoot and see, and they struck here and here. Now, this ammunition was 55 grain M193. Again, I don't know if that's what Hi-Lux used for their calibration, but that's what I was shooting in this rifle. I've also never found M193 ammunition to be particularly accurate. Some rifles will shoot it okay, some rifles hate it and won't shoot it very well at all. The rifle I was shooting shot it mostly kind of sort of okay, but it would have preferred something else, I'm sure. In any case, I fired these 2 shots. They are almost exactly the proper height above where I was aiming for the 100-yard trajectory of that cartridge. Next, I moved over to this aiming point because I wanted to put the 5.56 cartridges up this side of the target and the 7.62 cartridges up this side of the target. Using the 300-yard hold on this target, I fired these 2 shots. Now, if you look over here, I calculated exactly the proper point where the bullets should strike based on the subtension of the reticle at 100 yards. So when we look at a diagram of the reticle, we see that the first aiming point below the center crosshair for 300 yards subtends a distance of 2.5 minutes of angle. So I calculated the precise measurement for 2.5 minutes of angle at a distance of 100 yards, and that comes out to 2.6 inches, which is exactly where the center of this blue sticker is. Now I calculated these to the nearest 1/10 of an inch. So if you carry that out farther, you're going to get a longer decimal. But this came out to 2.6 inches rounded to the nearest 1/10 of an inch. The next lower crosshair for 400 yards subtends a distance of 5.6 minutes of angle, which is where the green sticker is here, and the measurement to the center there is 5.9 inches. That is 5.6 minutes of angle at 100 yards. The gray sticker that you see right here subtends 9.7 minutes of angle at 100 yards, which comes out to 10.2 inches. And the top red sticker here is the one for 600 yards. The reticle subtends a distance of 14.5 minutes of angle, which comes out to 15.2 inches from here. My aiming point was always these two stickers down here at the bottom. In fact, I was aiming at these dots in the very center so that I would be able to measure, or at least compare, the impacts of the bullets relative to the various stickers here that I placed at the proper subtension distance for 100 yards. So after firing these two shots to determine my trajectory was proper for a 50-yard zero at 100 yards with a sight height of 2.75 inches above the center of the bore line, I used the first aiming point for 300 yards to fire these two shots. And you can see they struck just a little bit high, and I really think this is just that M193 ammunition. And you'll see some of these, I have nice close shots, some of them are farther apart, and it's just because I'm not getting a real high level of accuracy out of this ammunition. It's not match grade ammo, and I'll talk more about that later. But the first shot here, or maybe I should say the lower shot, is pretty close to our 300-yard holdover. This is definitely going to be close enough for a reasonable sized target at 300 yards. Now, the CMR 1-8 has crosshairs that are somewhat thick. It's not intended to be an extremely precise reticle. It's intended to be precise enough and very quick. And again, this is going to be certainly accurate enough for any sort of a decent sized target at 300 yards. Next, I moved to the 400-yard indicator mark and fired these two shots, and this is pretty much right dead on. When we look at this as being right at 5.6 minutes of angle, this shot is almost dead on. This one's just a little bit high, not too bad. Then I came up to the 500-yard mark, and once again, using this as my point of aim with the 500-yard holdover, I fired these two, and they're pretty much dead on with the center of that 500-yard sticker. So no problem there. Then I came up to 600 yards, fired two shots here, or I should say the 600-yard indicator mark on the reticle. This one is basically perfect, maybe just a little bit low. This one's a little bit high, and I didn't calculate this. This looks like it's probably an inch high, so that's going to come out to probably about 6 inches high at 600 yards. Again, if you're shooting at anything larger than 1 minute of angle, you're going to have a pretty good chance of hitting it just using these holdovers. Now, something I probably should have said earlier, when you're trying to make the most accurate shot possible and you know the trajectory of your bullet, you're always going to be more accurate to dial in the trajectory compensation. But obviously that takes time. If you have to get a fast shot, that is what these indicators on that lower vertical stadia are intended to make possible, so you can just come up, if you know your distance, or if you can calculate it based on the size of those 18-inch subtensions that I talked about a little while ago, you can get these shots on target very, very quickly. But you need to test your ammunition and see where it's going to strike. Lastly, I fired two headshots from 100 yards using the 50-yard zero. This was one, this was the other. I was aiming basically right at the bottom of this gray area, knowing the bullets were going to strike a little bit high. And all in all, I thought this was reasonable accuracy for that scope and that ammunition with the rifle that I was using. I don't really see any problem with these holdovers at all. But once again, you need to make sure that this is going to be the proper trajectory for your rifle, your barrel length, your bullet weight, your muzzle velocity, etc., etc., etc. You always have to calculate all those variables. Next, I mounted the 1:8 CMR. On the Ruger American Hunter, I was using standard M80 ball ammunition, once again trying to use a military load since I don't know specifically what was used for calibrating those holdovers. I established my 50-yard zero. Once I did that, I fired these two shots at 100 yards. We can see that that ammunition is not striking nearly as high. And I don't think I didn't measure the sight height over bore on this rifle. I don't think it's as much as I was getting with the AR, so that's probably part of the reason these bullets didn't strike as high. In any case, once again, using this as my point of aim, I used the 300-yard hold and fired these two shots, and that's pretty darn close with the 7.62 ammo. This one's a little high, but again, at a distance of only 300 yards, I think those are both going to be pretty reasonable. I should probably also throw in, once again, this is not a match grade load. This is standard military spec ammunition, so it's probably not going to shoot the absolute most accurate shots that I could possibly get out of this rifle. Moving on to the 400-yard holdover, I fired these two shots. When we look at where the green sticker is right here, that's pretty close to dead on. One's a little bit low, one's a little bit high. I think that's pretty good compensation for the 400-yard shot, which was, what did I say, 5.6 minutes of angle. Moving up to the 500-yard holdover, I fired these two shots, maybe a little bit high, but not too bad from that distance. And lastly, I fired these two shots. These were almost touching, and this looks like the bullet was tumbling, but it was not. These are two different shots, both fired at 100 yards, and the shot holes on the target board behind the target were perfectly round, so nothing was tumbling or anything like that. I had another bullet hole on here someplace that looked kind of odd. It might have been this one, but this was not tumbling. Once again, that hole in the target board behind this target was perfectly round. But again, not too bad, maybe a little bit high for that 600-yard holdover, but again, I'm using what I would say is okay ammunition, but not super accurate ammunition. Finally, I fired two shots at 100 yards with the 50-yard zero using the M80 ammunition. One struck here, one went just a little bit farther to the right, but again, I'm not seeing any major problems with the holdover or the accuracy that I'm getting with this ammunition from the Ruger American Hunter rifle. So now I thought, what the heck, I got everything set up. Let's see if the CMR 1:8 is a tack driver from that distance of 100 yards. So I put a tack in the target, I set everything up, I loaded 2 rounds of ammunition. I only had 2 rounds of that M80 ball ammunition left, so I loaded 2 rounds of that into the rifle and fired out 2 shots, and here's how it went. And I think it's safe to say that didn't go too well. First shot struck here, second shot struck here, and I was out of that M80 ball ammo. So at this point, I'm kicking myself and saying, well, that's what you get for trying that shot with non-match grade ammo. And then I remembered, you know what? I brought some match ammo with me. When I was packing up to go to the range, I had a few rounds of match ammunition that I threw in with my stuff. And I thought, I'll take this along just in case I need it. And I'd kind of forgotten about it through the course of doing all the shooting and changing the scope from one rifle to the other. And all of a sudden, I remembered I had that. And again, I brought it along just in case I needed it. And I thought, you know what? I think I need it. So I grabbed my match ammo. I moved the tack to the other side of the target. And now I was in a bit of a quandary because I had been shooting the M80 ball, not the match ammo. And the match ammo had a slightly heavier bullet and it had a boat tail bullet. So I suspected it was going to hit a little bit higher than the M80 ball, but I didn't know how high. So I had to decide, do I either take a shot dead on at the tack, and if I miss, correct off of that miss for a hold on the second shot or third shot, or do I guesstimate and use a hold on the first shot, and if I hit the tack, great, If I miss, then I have to guesstimate my correction off of a hold rather than a dead center shot. So I opted for door number 1. I took my first shot at the tack, figuring if I hit it, great. If not, I'll adjust off of that shot for my second and or third shot. So here's how my second attempt at driving the tack with the match grade ammo went. So okay, that was more like it. That first shot that I aimed dead on at the tack hit about half a minute high. I loaded a second round of that match ammo in the rifle. I held about a half minute low and drove that thing out of there. So you can make up your own mind as to whether or not you think the CMR 1-8 is a tack driver. I don't normally take 2 different tries to drive a tack, but again, with the ammunition that I was using to begin with, I thought this was a little bit more fair test than I gave it the first time around. So folks, I've got to tell you, with the way this optic performed on my Ruger American Hunter rifle, it may well have found a new home. The compensation for trajectory is virtually right on. The accuracy, as you can see, is very good. And also, it's a lot lighter and more compact than the optic I used to have on here. So there's really not a downside. I can even dial this all the way down to 1 power and use this optic just like I would a red dot and get that very quick target acquisition. In any case, that's going to do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or comments, as always, make sure you forward those to me. And until next time, good shooting. Bye-bye.